Just way too many big names with injuries either happening in week 2 or leading into week 2. Of course, Tua's on injured reserve with his concussion. But look at this. 4 of the game's top receivers and really the best running back in the game all dealing with injuries. For more on that, we want to bring in our injury analyst, Marty Jaramillo. And let's start with Cooper Kupp, Marty. Sean McVay says he's going to miss an extended period of time with an ankle injury. What are you seeing there?
Chris, can you believe this list? Some of the best players in the NFL
terrible
today. Listen, you know, Cooper Kupp, he just can't get going. Back in 2022, he had the high ankle sprain surgery, the tightrope procedure. Then last year, he was sidelined multiple weeks with the hamstring, that chronic hamstring tear. And now what happens this year in week 2? He injures his now left ankle. If you saw that replay, it actually might have been a hip drop tackle, but his ankle was actually turned inwards, which is what's called an eversion sprain. 90% of all sprains are actually inversion, when the ankle turns over. His actually went outwards and also predisposed him to a high ankle sprain. So he's going to miss extended amount of time. He's going to be treated for both, really, the high ankle sprain and the eversion sprain. Is going to be a minimum of 4 weeks. Now, as time goes on, more testing, more scans. If it turns out to be more of a high ankle sprain, because it actually could be a little bit of both, he actually might opt to have the tightrope procedure, which he had back in 22, which can accelerate the healing. So we can go from 4 weeks to 6 weeks very quickly. But every single fantasy manager out there is just waiting for him to get going, because we know what a dynamic player he is.
And they're hosting the San Francisco 49ers this week, who have major injury concerns on offense as well. 2 of the top weapons in the league. What's going on with Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel?
Well, let's talk a little about Deebo. With less than 2 minutes left in that game versus the Vikings, he injures his calf. And unfortunately, this calf strain, even though it's a minor tear, just add that on the list of so many injuries he's had since 2019 and joining the 49ers. Now, listen, calf strains, like hamstring strains, are stubborn, difficult to treat, and can be tricky. Now, his initial designation is to be off for 2 weeks. I think that's extremely aggressive. Why? Because this is what we know about calf tears. If they go unmanaged or rushed, that can create tightness in the Achilles, and that could predispose the Achilles from anywhere from an Achilles tendonitis to an Achilles tear. And that is what we're talking about now with Christian McCaffrey. Now, with CMC, here's what you have. How do you protect a player who essentially plays the most unprotected position in the NFL? This is what you have to do. You have to put him on injury reserve. Why? Because you, in theory, have to protect him from himself, because you know what a warrior he is. So what happened in preseason, he aggravated a calf tear that he had at the end of his record-breaking season last year. So he re-injured that calf tear, lost all of the preseason this year, and all that downtime on the calf forced the Achilles to overwork. It got tight. And that Achilles, tremendous amount of elasticity. And when it loses that elastic property, it gets thick, it gets painful, and predisposes it to tears. So they have no choice but to put him on injured reserve, which is initial 4 weeks. They will reassess at 4 weeks, and 4 can become 6 very quickly.
And they're hoping that 6 means he can return week 6. That's the earliest that he'd be able to, but as we know, you just never know with those things. The Vikings, on the other hand, you know, they're rolling. They're 2-0. They hit a 97-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson, but then he hurts his quad. Now, he says he expects to play this week. Are you concerned at all with that injury?
I am concerned. I'll tell you why, Chris. So I love JJ, and I love his swag. I mean, he goes right into that press conference and says, I'm fine. It's just a thigh bruise. I'll get into the training room, get it fixed, and I'm ready for next week. And right away I knew, thank you, JJ. I appreciate that confidence. But the test is yesterday, today, tomorrow, when the pain, the swelling, the spasm, and the tightness set in. And then that's what the trainers are really working with. It's that 2 days of post-game effect. So here's what the issue is. Typically, a thigh bruise is no big deal. However, it has a tendency to fill with lots of fluid and blood, and that can create something called a hematoma, which is basically a large pocket of fluid. And if the pocket is large enough, it could shut down the strength of the thigh, which would basically keep him out. So the medical staff, the athletic trainers, physical therapists, and everyone involved basically have to work overtime to minimize the potential for that fluid to collect in the thigh that would keep him out. Now, I expect 75, maybe 80% that he plays because he felt so good at the end of the game. He was willing to talk about it. Remember, last year when he was out 7 games, he also talked about it when all his fantasy fans were getting upset when he was out so long and they were on his team. He was on their team.
Certainly hope he plays. I mean, he's on my team this week. He's also on CBS this week. 2-0 Vikings, 2-0 Texans at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. Most of the time, though, you'd rather have a quad injury than a hamstring injury on the back end of that thigh. And that's what Eagles fans are worried about with A.J. Brown. He missed last night, expected to miss a couple of more weeks potentially. What can you tell us about that one?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the hamstring and why, to your exact point, why you'd rather have a thigh injury than a hamstring. So the quads, the thigh, the hip flexor, they accelerate the limb, right? They create that speed. The hamstrings are essentially your brakes. Without good brakes, you don't take that Ferrari out, right? So here's what's very interesting. His injury actually occurred in practice. AJ's injury, he kind of popped up on the injury list on Friday and made him ineligible for Sunday's game. I'm sorry, Monday's game. So the hamstring is a very interesting injury. So typical tears are small, but there's 3 major issues. Yes, they are small, but what the body does is it actually tightens up around this small tear. So this very small tear, the area that the athletic trainers are working on becomes much larger because this healthy tissue tightens up to protect this small tear. Number 2, it doesn't have very great blood supply. So just by default, it takes a while for them to heal. And third, these tears typically have a tendency to be very deep. So actually it's very hard to get to, even with the strongest of hands. So listen, 2 weeks, I'm going to tell you, that's aggressive. Because if you don't manage a hamstring tear early and conservative and take it slow, you end up with a long-term problem. So fingers crossed on that 2 weeks. I think it's aggressive.
Now, they have a tough schedule coming up to in New Orleans, then in Tampa, and then home against the Browns. And now we have the 2-time defending champion Kansas City Chiefs having concerns at running back. They went out, they had to sign Kareem Hunt to their practice squad because Isaiah Pacheco is out anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, we're hearing, with a fractured fibula. What's the recovery process there after surgery?
A scary moment indeed for all Chief fans and teammates and everyone, really, because it was a scary moment. If you watch that replay over and over again, he was predisposed to a number of different injuries, from a severe fracture to an ankle of dislocation to a high ankle sprain. Believe it or not, the fibula fracture, which he was diagnosed with, was the best case scenario. Let me tell you why. The fibula, and this is actually a little show and tell, Chris, right? The fibula is the outside bone. And what's great about fracturing the outside bone, it is considered a non-weight bearing bone. So less than 10% of your body weight goes through it. I've had many athletes that have a fractured fibula and don't even realize it because they're not putting any weight through it. So he does require surgery just to make sure that the bone sets correctly. And that's a good thing. But despite the hardware and the pins to keep it straight, he'll actually heal perfectly and have 0 issues, both short-term and long-term. I expect anywhere between 6 and 8 weeks. This is exactly the same injury as Mark Andrews with the Ravens had last year. It took him 9 weeks to get back. But anywhere between that 6 weeks and 9 weeks, he's going to come back. It is a big, big loss. But short term, he's going to get better. Long term, there'll be no issues with anything, including performance and effectiveness on the field.
So many big names on the injured list this week. Marty Jaramillo here breaking it down for us and letting us know what the process is like in recovery. Thank you, Marty. We've got a couple of 2-0 matchups in that early window on CBS this Sunday. Chargers-Steelers. Texans-Vikings. Hopefully, Justin Jefferson will be able to play in that one. Marty says 75% or so he thinks that JJ is going to play in that one.